Evening all. Slight change of event actually. I was going to look at games from the Reykjavik Open, but I had some very interesting games last night, and I feel we could suspend Reykjavik Open for next week. I want to show you these games from last night, which I'm more intimate with. Okay, so there were 2 rapid games. So that's 30-minute chess. It was in the North Circular League, and I was playing. It was a full board match. I was on board 1, so it was 2 games to play, 2 30-minute games back to back, and playing Wanstead. And they had an international master on board 2, and I was actually playing someone higher rated on rapid, Peter Batchelor. So he's like a 223 on ECF Rapid, so higher than me on Rapid Chess. I'm like 215. So that puts him around 28th in the country at Rapid Chess. So this first game I was playing white against him, and I kicked off with E4, and he played the Caracan, so C6, and I chose D4. After D5, I chose the advanced variation E5 of the Caracan, and I think this has been popularised a lot by Nigel Short originally. So the idea is to put the bishop here, not to trade off if this bishop's coming to F5. Okay, and the bishop actually did go to F5. I think if you do play bishop d3, you risk weakening key light squares later, and I think that generally is known to give black an easy position to play. But knight f3, there are some congestion issues for black with this advance here. The f6 square has been deprived for this knight, this natural development here, so black has to somehow arrange piece development for these 3. Black played e6, and now I played bishop e2, and okay, it's a small edge for white in space, but it looks as though if this was a French defense structure, black would be playing for c5 and knight c6 later with the bishop outside of the pawn chain. So knight d7, and I castled. Now knight e7, so where is this knight heading? Actually, there's a very interesting idea here that the knight might not be heading here, but in fact there's an option for black to play c5 and put the knight on c6. This would resolve the congestion issue on the king side. So I play here knight bd2, knowing that c5 might be played, but I thought there might be an idea of trying to open up the centre even more if c5 is played. After c5, I actually responded a bit like we covered this Nigel Short game recently. He was on the black side of his own system, and his opponent actually kind of opened up the centre with c4, and I thought this might be an interesting idea to play c4 here, try and open up the centre. Okay, what does black actually want to do in this position? Well, the congestion issues on the king side need to be resolved somehow. He does put the knight on c6, so it frees the bishop to go to e7. I thought a slight downside is that maybe this d5 pawn is going to be a bit weaker than it should be. So I play c takes d5, and after e takes, I actually just take away from the centre with d takes c5, because I have a specific idea here that I can try and use the d4 square with knight b3 to d4. And also there's a possibility of bishop b5 and rook e1 being quite useful here. So my opponent plays knight takes c5, and okay, in this position I carry on with this idea that if I get a knight to d4, there's a tempo gain on the bishop on f5 in any case. So this looks, you know, quite lucrative to do this. So I play knight b3, and I think if he takes here, then the queen's nicely placed looking at b7 with pressure on d5. He actually plays knight e6. Okay, and if black, this knight actually looks very good. If black can just play bishop e7 and castles, black would seem to be doing very well here indeed. So I want to try and interrupt this, and here is where I thought, well, bishop b5. I'm just in time interrupting this plan now. If black wants the castle, there's going to be a problem with knight d4 hitting c6 and f5. Okay, so black played actually now bishop e7, and I play knight bd4, so I'm hitting the bishop, putting pressure on c6. This is resolved now by black taking on d4, knight takes d4, and with the bishop and c6 on the fire, bishop d7 responds to both. Okay, but I thought, okay, there's an interesting idea here still of trying to disrupt and dissuade black from castling in this position, forcing move sequence here. I play bishop takes c6, and after b takes c6, I just play e6 because I'm thinking this could be a disruptive check on f takes e. What else does black do anyway here apart from f takes e6? So that is played. Check g6, and the decision here is, I mean, it's not enough I think to stop black castling, because black could try and castle queenside I think on queen h6. So queen h6. In fact, if we try and put a bit here, I don't think this is particularly good. Queen h6. Well, black is technically doing quite well, but I think queen e2 as played is better than queen h6, even from the engine point of view. Queen h6, I'm not sure this is threatening anything. I think black's going to be doing fine. So I think, trying to be a nuisance, I play the queen back to e2. So I'm looking at e6 here. So how does black actually respond to this? Well, black defends e6 with king f7 now. I just pile on a bit more pressure with rook e1. Okay, and now quite a clever looking move just to temporarily give up that e6 pawn is played is bishop f6. But I spot, actually, I don't need to play necessarily knight takes e6. There's some other moves here. I actually choose instead knight takes c6. Okay, so if bishop takes c6, I can just take on e6, and I should be doing well here in this position. So after knight takes c6, though, black does have a good move in queen c7. So repelling my knight back, and I was a bit worried here, to be honest. I mean, it's still just about equal in theory. The engine's giving it about equal this position. I don't really want to have the queens exchanged off in this position, because I think, you know, black enjoys this c file quite quickly. If I play knight e5 check, I think black can just, if black gets off the queens, I think there's not too much of a problem for black here. For example, this position, it's opposite colour bishops. I think black actually stands better because of this infiltration to the southern flank quite quickly. So let's go back to knight b4. Was my was my preference to knight e5 check. So I played knight b4, and here actually queen c4 looks as though black is really interested in exchanging queens. I just played knight d3 actually, and this actually looks okay now for white. If bishop b5, he's just neglecting e6. He can't really do that. That'll be check. But there's also this knight e5 check idea. And technically, I think the engine's suggesting king g7 here. This wasn't played actually. So this looks like an interesting position. But I think white has a slight bind on the e5 square. And in fact, technically b3 is possible here for bishop b2, it seems, to try and get rid of this f6 bishop, maybe b3. If queen e5, I think that's a nuisance move anyway. And we're hitting the queen here. So the queen would move, and then we got bishop b2. I think if we knock out this bishop, the bind on e5 is emphasized. Okay, so after knight d3, my opponent actually played rook ac8, and I thought this is just very pleasant though to get this dark square bishop. So I get the dark square bishop with knight e5 checks. I'm forking king and queen here. So bishop takes e5. Queen takes e5, and okay, it's opposite colour bishops, but there's weakened dark squares around the place. Bishop g5, bishop h6, these all look quite dangerous. And there's a slight issue with the back row here, if I'm not careful, with c1. Black now, he's still interested in the exchange of queens. He plays queen c7. I drop back just here, eyeing a7, and in fact, to accelerate development, it looks a bit strange, but black sacked the a7 pawn here. Should I dare take it? Well, by taking it, it does create past a pawn later. I didn't see particularly bad refutation, so I did take this. Okay, black's gaining a tempo for doubling rooks, which will actually make queen c1 a threat. Queen e3, but there's another point revealed here, that black can liberate the position a little bit with e5. So on queen takes e5, this would be a bad. No, maybe it's not a bad mistake. If rook e8, this is not a disaster because of queen f4 check. We can connect rooks just about, but I didn't play that. No, instead, I actually played queen f3 check, bishop f5. And now h3 threatens g4 to win that bishop on f5. Okay, so I think black has some difficulties. Potentially, theoretically, there's two connected passed pawns here, but it's the dark squares which are of particular interest in this position to white. Okay, so black actually now played e4. And I don't know, I regretted this after. For some weird reason, I didn't play queen f4, which would keep this threat of g4. For some reason, I thought queen g3 was interesting. I went for queen g3 instead. And my opponent played rook hc8, and I think he is actually threatening potentially a queen c1 to grab both rooks, potentially. I play bishop g5, and it looks as though queen e5 to f6 is dangerous. I think h5, queen f4, and now g4 is actually threatened. King g8. And here there is a slight issue about the rook on c7. I noticed in this position. So I play actually g4 after hg. The bishop drops back, and here, you know, rook ac1 is already possible on c7, but I play actually queen e5, which apparently is not technically as strong. The threat is now on the bishop, and also rook c1. There's two threats. Black should have responded with queen c6 to defend e6 here, apparently. So a slight blunder here now. He actually took here, which is a mistake, because I'm on c7. I just play rook ac1, so I'm picking up c7. The bishop's holding the rook here, so it's winning a little bit of material. So I was quite optimistic here. Took on c1. Now first, instead of taking on c1, I pick up the d5 pawn with check. King moves, and now I take the queen. And now I just take on e4 to protect my rook. So it's queen versus rook and bishop scenario has emerged. After rook takes e1, queen takes e1. With these two passed pawns, it was quite easy for me to, well, relatively easy, to try and convert this into a win. After f4, there were quite a few moves later. It wasn't recorded. It was a 30-minute game last night, but eventually I managed to win this. I think I'm standing very well here with the two passed pawns and the queen against the rook and bishop. So I thought that was an interesting game from last night. That was in round 1 of this Lawrence Cup in the North Circular League. So just a quick look at that again. So Caro-Kann, it was an advanced variation. And so e6, bishop e2. So I think Nigel Short popularised this idea of bishop e2. It's getting some good results, I think, in recent times. So black is trying for a c5 to put the knight on c6. But you know, if I responded with c3, I think that gives black what he wants here. Actually, if c3, it looks as though black has an improved French defence with the bishop outside of the pawn chain. So I thought this would be good fun instead. Just play c4, and then so we saw this position where actually I can use the d4 square. I think it's kind of, it was a Nimzovich concept about giving up the centre to try and have active pieces in the centre, and it looks a little bit like that concept here, that I can use the d4 square for active piece play to replace literal occupation of the centre. But here e6 goes for black's king safety, this idea, so it's a bit disruptive for castling. So knight c6 here. I think on, as mentioned, knight takes e here. I think this actually might be okay as well, technically. If rook e8, well, I can just take the queen. So the queen would move. And knight g5, this is okay for white as well. But I took on c6, and I think the knight coming back here is okay, actually, because that's the backward pawn was actually on e6. That's the backward pawn, technically. So that was an okay manoeuvre, I think, in retrospect. So winning the dark square bishop, and I think the queen sits quite well on d4 here. This is quite annoying. What does black actually want to do in this position? Because I'm actually threatening things, I think, like bishop g5, or maybe even b3, or bishop d2, just to get on this diagonal. I think this diagonal's quite sensitive. So, or bishop h6 even. Okay, so queen c4, just trying to get the queens off, but it loses a pawn. So the check. E4, And I think, yeah, Queen F4 would have been, I think, an improvement. I don't know what I was thinking exactly there. Bishop G5. So we saw this, yeah. I think Rook C1 here would just leave the two connected pass pawns rather cleanly, actually, by force, without giving black a chance for anything else. If we just got rid of the queens here, or even that doesn't have to be taken. Just King H2, just get rid of the get black's queen. Yeah, this is okay as well. This position, just play Rook C1. So it's simply actually winning. It was giving up both rooks, but apparently, technically, this is okay for white. I think this opposite coloured bishop pawn ending here, if I do just play queen takes, apparently this is only a small advantage for white. It's actually better not to avoid this. I mean, d4, we've got these two pass pawns in the centre. Maybe these aren't a big deal here. If we just have a quick look at this. So king h2 instead. I think white has some key threats on the dark squares, and to try and coordinate the bishop and queen. Okay, so yeah, so I was a bit fortunate to get this position. This is a clear advantage for black, for white. So at the halfway stage, Barnett were leading by half a point in this match. So there I am on board 2, actually. 1, and on board 3, Alex Aflontis, he won. So, and we'd drawn on board 4, so we were sort of half a point up after round 1. So in round 2, I was playing black against Peter. So I'll just show you that game. I'll flip the board. Okay. So I was black, so 30-minute game from last night. D4, and for some reason, well, I thought the King's Indian defence is more well known than, say, Albin countergambit, so I thought I'd play Albin countergambit instead, be on the risky side. So after c4 e5, a bit of a dodgy gambit sometimes. D takes d4, knight f3, I play knight c6, g3, and I gambit a pawn with f6. So he took this, knight takes f6, okay, accelerate development, bishop g2, bishop g4, and I've got an idea of queen d7, bishop h3. And he plays a3, which looks like a standard plan for b4. Yeah. Okay, so what does black actually want to do? I mean, this is a quandary, actually. If I played a5, then I can't really castle queenside with a5, because it would just be a lever for black's queenside play. So I play queen d7, allowing b4. The problem with allowing b4 is, you know, bishop b2, there's going to be a lot of pressure on d4. He castles here. And I think this is a bad mistake already from me. If I'm going to castle queenside here, the issue really is one of the main immediate ones is b4 bishop b2, and this d pawn just quite loose. And apparently there is a potential way around this. If black immediately castles queenside and then b4, okay, so white is threatening things like bishop b2, but here apparently queen f5, and if bishop b2, black can play d3. That would be okay, just to get rid of the liability as soon as possible. So this is important to be able to do this here by an immediate castling queenside for queen f5 and d3. If that's tried to be stopped, I mean I think queen d3, queen h5, that's okay for black. But the way I played it, I think this is an inaccuracy, a major inaccuracy actually here, to play bishop h3. It loses a little bit of time. I think I was slightly concerned that there's a slight concern tactically, which needs to be juggled here, that if I don't get rid of this light square bishop, then sometimes if white, say, plays knight bd2, if castles knight bd2 or queen b3, there is a threat without b4. There's a threat of knight e5. So if it takes, there's mating on b7, like this splat. That's pretty nasty. But white is generally going to play b4 here. If white's, so you've got to factor this in, that white's not going to play queen b3 for knight e5. Is it that critical to get rid of the bishop on g2 here immediately with bishop h3? So that's quite a difficult thing to judge here. If we just look at this position with immediate castle queen b3, okay, maybe there isn't such a need for panic. That's it. There is a clear threat of knight e5, but maybe it's not the end of the world. So queen b3, black can just simply parry. Actually, it seems with rook e8 that might be acceptable. And you'll notice the pressure on d4 is a bit reduced. The queen is not on d4. It's like it was just setting up for this sort of kind of trap, really. e3, maybe this might be okay for black, just about. Apparently knight a5, and then d3. This might be okay for black, just about. Although I'm not so sure about this. But in the game, it just seems quite an immediately this bishop h3. You'll see now, it's kind of embarrassing that b4 works very well here. After bishop takes, king takes, the queen is still eyeing d4. That's the key thing. So bring the bishop into the party. d4 is a big liability. After castles, bishop b2. And what am I actually doing about d4? Given that b5 is also on the cards to undermine d4, the centre's actually being quite badly undermined. The opportunity to play something like queen f5, I think that's gone now. Actually queen d3 here, and white controls actually the e4 square rather nicely, and is still threatening things like b5 for d4 dropping off. Doesn't seem to be too much compensation here. So anyway, for some reason there was a sort of bluff move played, as though I was going to strike at the king side with h4 and open up here. And I think white can just play to win d4. The queen is still on d1 here. It hasn't moved to b3 or a4. So b5 undermines d4. I go to a5. And in this position, simply, it does seem that queen takes d4 is good. And this was also sort of mentioned by this IM after the game. Queen takes d4 here. There I am. It looks as though there shouldn't be a problem here for white at all, just picking up d4 here. If queen takes d4, for example, bishop takes d4, this doesn't work, this knight b3. There's always bishop takes f6. Still protecting a1 here, and then that's just horrible. The rook can just move. So it seems there was an opportunity missed here. That queen takes d4 is really, really good. So I think I was totally let off the hook, but it was just 30-minute chess. And I'll just move this window a bit. Hold on a sec. Okay. In this position, Queen A4 kind of lets me off the hook. Technically, it's gone to equal immediately after Queen A4. And in fact, the engine's suggesting I don't even need to protect the knight. I thought I had to protect the knight, but apparently H4 here. This is quite interesting. If it takes HG, so this is quite dangerous now for white. Let's have a look. Like here is a mate in 4. King G1, G takes, and then taking on F1. So that shows it's quite dangerous, this position. So in this position, black is doing actually very well. If H4, apparently knight H5. So this is interesting, just to sack the knight and the pawn here. If queen takes A7 here, then again there's a forced mate. Apparently check, Queen H3. And if check here, that's a small inconvenience. Small inconvenience. King E6. There's 2 threats of mate here, knight E2 and Queen G2. So yeah, I didn't see any of that. No, I just thought I needed to protect the knight. Actually, it's something to be aware of if you're going to play the Alvin counter gambit. Then, in this sort of position, that if you can get this H-file attack accelerated. The other thing to note, I guess, is knight takes H4. I think we just snapped that off with rook takes H4. Check. Okay, here apparently 2 moves are good. Queen E4 and taking here. So it looks all a bit slow for white, this A file. So anyway, I played this arguably a poxy move instead of H4. So Queen A4, I played B6 instead, poxy. So white's still doing very well here technically. And he actually closes up my H4 possibility. And I thought intuitively last night, actually, that I've missed out on a trick here. Why did I spend time just protecting this knight when I've got this? It was all geared up for the H-file attack. So this was a very ripe moment for just playing H4. It's something to bear in mind. So anyway, so B6, I let my opponent play H4. On the other hand, after Queen G4, at least, you know, my D pawn is looking quite secure and can be backed up with Bishop C5. So Queen C2, Bishop C5. So I was sort of pleased with the position. Rook D1, I think Rook HE8. Now after Queen D3, and this is the whole problem with this game and the whole of today, I just couldn't sleep after this game. This next move, it's actually wrecked my day today, to be honest. I didn't know what I was doing tonight. But can you see what I played here? Which kind of led to a sleepless night after the game. This is a big part of it. So if I gave you 20 seconds here, what would you play with black? Any ideas? So black to play here. Any ideas? I mean, pieces look as though they're working well as a team. The 2 rooks are together. White's development hasn't yet completed. Although there's a regret I didn't open up the H file. Anyone spot something interesting? Yeah. Okay. I play rook e3, and usually, yeah. I just thought this was really good, and it seems technically the engines actually like this move. It reminds me of Alecoin's game against Reti a little bit, the rook e3. It's a bit of a crusher here. For example, if it's not taken, if queen d2, we can actually just take on c4 here, if nothing else. But I think even there might be some other moves, like even d3, that might be possible. Because it's undermining f3. If it takes, we're on f3. I just want to show, I mean, the gravity of this game. I'm playing someone who's ranked 28 in the country on Rapid Chess. That's higher rated than me at 223. At that ranking, you know, it's near all the GMs and IMs for Rapid Chess. So to play a move like this, but it did seem to work out. If f takes e, knight e4, how is black actually defending g3? If king f1, for example, then this is easy with check, because the knight actually covers d2 here. So here, queen h1 check is mating. So there's a problem here to solve. If king, if rook f1, this was mentioned after the game by someone. So we're going to give up g3, but I don't think this should work, and I don't think it does. So queen h3. For example, apparently black is doing quite well here, just with the check to avoid the use of the g3 square. Now if king h2, that brings the bishop in. Now I didn't calculate all these variations, by the way, I'm just checking with you now with an engine. So here, check, we can have quite a good attack here. Knight f5 check, check, check. Apparently this is a forced mate in 10. Knight takes h4, threatening queen g2 mating. And white is in big trouble here. Engine's wanting to give up the queen. What does white do about queen g2? If rook g1, then queen h3, and we're just mating on h2 instead. So it looks as though this move is not only brilliant looking, it's actually fairly crushing in the circumstance. It just, how is white defending g3? He's not. He gives up his queen. He felt compelled to give up his queen. So he's got the rook though and a knight. So it's not all over. It's a rook and a knight. So that's 5 plus 8. You know, plus 3, 8 against the queen. 8 units. So anyway, so the game continues. Queen takes e4. And this is very unpleasant. If he plays, you know, takes here, then queen takes e2 check, and that's winning even more material. So he plays knight bd2, giving me the e3 pawn, try and get his pieces working. Rook e1, and now I play another move just to liberate the bishop. I was wondering about the potential backfire on the e file, but I thought I've got to get onto f2 here. I played d3, opening up this line. After ed, queen f2 check, and here he puts his king on h3. I think that is better than h1. If king h1, rook takes d3. I've always got g3 to take here. I don't think this is very pleasant for black, for white. Pardon me. So he puts his king on h3. Rook takes d3. I have to be careful. Rook f1, because this back row is a bit sensitive, potentially. Queen e3, and his rooks seem to be coordinating at least. I drop back to h6. And then bishop e5 after some thought here. Bishop e5. And it looks as though this is a little trap. If rook takes d2, I think just bishop f4 closes the trap on that. And this isn't so brilliant for me if I lost that exchange. So that's to be avoided. So I cut across this bishop f4 resource. I play actually bishop e3. Now rook e2 was played. But there is pressure on d2. And it does seem as though bishop takes d2 is entirely possible and a good move, actually. Technically, here checking. It was pointed out it's just winning a piece after. But what I played is actually, it turns out, what I played is actually technically stronger than bishop takes d2. If bishop takes d2, say knight takes d2, rook takes d2, bishop f4. I mean, this position is a knight up for black, and that should be okay. So that's possible as well. But I played something which apparently is technically stronger. Is to play knight takes c4 instead, because I want to use this queen e6 check to bring back my knight. I'm knocking out the pawn chain here. So knight takes c4 check, and queen takes c4. I thought this was okay, this position here. Now if he tries to double, well, he didn't try to immediately double, he took on g7 first. Okay, and I took this pawn, attacking the rook, and I knew that, okay, the doubling might be dangerous, but I can now force off a pair of rooks with rook a2. So rook takes a2, queen takes, king h3, and then just queen f2, hitting f3, and if that moves I take the rook. He plays rook takes e3, queen takes. It's all over. After knight e5 I just play queen g1, threatening horrible things like queen h1. He resigned here. Apparently g4 is maybe white's best. I can just take that, and well, queen against the two pieces here. I can take here, and I should be. He only had like seconds left anyway. Usually it's after a bad loss I might lose sleep, but I did actually lose sleep after these two games, and I think the problem is I was just overly excited, I think, with this game. Just with the rook e3 move, it just affected me quite badly. I just didn't get much sleep last night. But I did check out quickly, by the way, some games of Reykjavik. I don't know, I think for next week though I should be much better prepared. So that's why there was a change of plan. It was this game in particular, which was too exciting. So that's something to bear in mind. So for me at least anyway, maybe not to play such exciting stuff, but there was other, I mean, the engines pick up other dynamic stuff that was actually missed in this game. It's quite brilliant to consider that, you know, you'd think b6 is necessary, but h4 here is okay, is a great move apparently. So that's quite amazing as well, but that's a missed opportunity there for b6. But the whole thing about d4 is quite interesting with the queen on d1. That precision is really needed to bear this in mind, that d4's massive liability here for b4 and bishop b2. So the timing of this bishop h3 needs to be factored in. It seems this was incorrect. If white had played it correctly, then d4 drops. Okay, I hope you got something from this. These two games. Okay, I hope you have a good week. Comments or questions on YouTube. And yeah, there should be some games from a tournament next week. Thanks very much.